Hey y'all, it's Livi Redden. Welcome back to Today is the Future. Today I have on Dr. Jenna Flowers. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a private practice in Newport Beach, California. And her practice focuses on co-parenting, relationships, and trauma. She is the author of the book, The Conscious Parent's Guide to Co-Parenting, which was published by Simon & Schuster. So cool, dream goal of mine. She frequently speaks about co-parenting, parenting, and women's mental health, which I think is amazing. And you can also hear more on parenting from Dr. Jenna on the Mainspring Family Wellness podcast, where all things parenting and family wellness are discussed. If you're interested in checking it out, that will all be in the description. And as far as what we're talking about today, I have talked about, divorce and marriage on the podcast before, but I'm definitely excited for our conversation today because this is going to take a little bit of a different angle. And just diving into working through the trauma of being trauma or just internal struggle of being a child of divorce or a child of an unhealthy marriage, as well as how this can affect your dating life as a young adult, which is something I've struggled with. And a variety of topics surrounding parenting and marriage, relationships, love, divorce, all that good stuff. So, Jenna, hello, welcome.
Hello, Livi. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, I'm excited. This is gonna be, I don't know if fun's maybe the word, but interesting.
Well, yes. And let's hope that we go a little deep, right?
Yeah,
that we're talking about this in a way that it really hits people and maybe also inspires some awakening and healing.
Yeah. And to start out, I had told Jenna prior to us recording, we're gonna go dating, marriage, divorce is kind of how we're breaking this episode up. And so to open it, I think the first thing I wanted to ask you about was, as someone in my 20s, there's so much, especially just scrolling through TikTok, there's just so many 20-somethings. They're like, I hate it. They're like, I hate dating. I don't want to do this. And I was like, so many people being like, I picked the wrong people. I don't know what to do. And so I guess the first question I would have for you is, someone that feels like you find yourself consistently picking the wrong people, or that's how it feels to you. What would be your thoughts to somebody in their 20s that feels like it never seems to, make it into something that's a little bit more long-term and feels healthy?
I think that's a great question, and I think it comes back to value system. So a lot of people sell themselves short, and they settle very quickly in dating. And if you really hold to the values of what you want, so say if you want to be in a long-term relationship, then fast hookups, dating bunches of people without any kind of commitment, that's not going to get you to a long-term relationship. You actually need to find somebody that also desires that kind of goal. Now, for a lot of people in their 20s, at least when I meet young women in my practice, they're like, it's so hard to find guys, though, that want that. And so they often feel like they have to kind of settle or desensitize themselves for what they're truly wanting to at least then be out there and dating. But then what really is dating? What is quality dating? I think that is one of the main questions that a lot of people have to ask themselves is like, what do you want out of a dating relationship? If you want commitment, then you have to look for people that are willing to commit.
Yeah.
And you have to stick to those goals and then actually say, no, thank you. I'm going to pass on that because it's not the kind of person that you want to be with. And also, people with good boundaries find other people with good boundaries. So if you have really good internal boundaries for yourself about what you're wanting and you're willing to say no to poor boundaries, red flags, unsafe people, then you will continue to move towards someone that will be a safe person and look for that kind of person in just even organically through your work life, through other friends, through community organizations, through your passion projects, through volunteering. They're out there. there are good people out there.
Yeah, yeah. And I love what you said that when it comes to boundaries, that people that have good boundaries will find people that have good boundaries.
Yes.
Because I find the more, I mean, I've definitely experienced that where the better I've gotten at not settling and expressing what I need, especially like starting early on, I find more people that are like, yeah, I respect that. Perfect.
Yeah, basically, there are people that will start to show you red flags very early on, but then are you the kind of person that recognizes the red flag and then does something about it? For a lot of people, they'll go, oh, that's kind of quirky, or wow, that's kind of a weird thing. What is that about? And then they just kind of gloss over it and continue to stay in that relationship. And that's why then they continue to draw themselves to unhealthy people, because they're not actually setting boundaries at the very beginning and saying, I actually don't want to date someone like this. This is a red flag for me. And it's not being overly picky. Yes, you are being selective because you're choosing to say yes to someone much greater than what this relationship is offering.
And on the topic of red flags, because I think this is a question I find I ask myself a lot of, how do you know, because everyone's going to have things, you know, going to have things that you struggle with. We all have flaws. How do you know if it is like, this is a red flag and something I'm not willing to compromise on, and something of like, that's just a flaw and I can work with that? You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Or maybe a flaw is kind of a harsh term, but you know what I mean? Like something that is, you know, that's a quirk, and we all have quirks. You know?
Yes, you know, there is the 30-year longitudinal study on relationships was developed by the Gottmans out of the University of Washington. And the Gottmans would say out of this research that you want to make sure that when you have problems in a relationship, that they're solvable problems. So when problems continue and they become chronic, they become gridlocked problems. And I think the research is over 60, well, I'm going to misquote this. I think it's like 68% of perpetual problems are what are encountered in a relationship. It's a very high percentage of problems that people actually have that are chronic problems. They're not going to go away. So you want to do your best to find what is solvable early and continue for them to be solvable. If they just continue to linger, then they become chronic. And also, is this the kind of relationship where, you know, you have, I'm so sorry, I lost my train of thought.
You were talking about solvable, and then is this the kind of relationship where...
Yes, solvable. You know what? It just,
You're
it
good.
left. It
You're
left
good.
so we can edit that.
No, you're fine. No, I love it. It's, I do the same thing. And I've been doing this for like 4 years. Well, so on the topic of solvable, is that, because, you know, we can't always expect somebody to completely change.
Some relationships are going to have certain issues, right?
Yeah.
So you want to just make sure they're issues that are livable for you.
Livable.
Right?
Okay.
Like, what is actually doable? The masters of relationship will say, like, if there's something quirky about somebody, do you see it as, oh, that's just like a cute, like, quirk about the person that I love?
Can I work
and
with
so
that?
it's, yes, can I work with it? And then there's other things where then, no, now I'm just completely critical of it, and I actually have contempt for it, and I can't live with it, right? So if it's not livable for you, then that's not probably your right person, and hopefully you've discovered that earlier on in your dating relationship rather than making a real long-term commitment to that person.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like the interlocking of the quirks. Can my things, I don't know, I feel I tread lightly on calling them like issues or flaws, I guess, because we all kind of have.
We all absolutely do.
You know, we have things. So yeah, like do mine interlock well with yours, I suppose, would be the question. And on that topic, when we're talking about dating, I'm not quite sure how to phrase this, but because there's such a debate on like, well, when you first meet someone, the butterflies aren't actually a good thing, and that means that they're like playing games with you. And then other people are like, yeah, but that's kind of part of it where you're wondering, and that's like natural human design and desire. And I don't know, there's just a lot of debate on how it should feel when you first start dating someone or when you meet somebody. And I guess, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, on like how it should feel in your body if you know that when you're first dating somebody that like this could be something healthy, if that makes sense. Like, is it too much of like a chase? Does that make sense?
That's a powerful question. I mean, I think it's going to be different for everyone.
Yeah.
But the idea of, feeling something, though, the fact that somebody is feeling something and having an awareness of it when it comes to that relationship, that's important information. So if you're looking forward to the next time you see this person, you can't get them out of your head. You maybe do have butterflies, or maybe you're not eating as much because you're just so excited. It depends on the person, what they're going to be feeling or experiencing about it, but notice your reaction to it. If you have I could give or take a couple weeks before I see that person, that might not really be somebody you're totally jazzed about. Because to be in a relationship that you're really willing to commit to and foster a really fantastic relationship, it requires time and the sense of friendship that you want to pal around with that person. Your life is more enhanced when you're actually with that person.
Yeah, that definitely answers it for me, because what comes up and what I'm hearing you say is that it's going to be more so, am I excited to be who I am around that person, or am I excited to like, where I feel like it can feel more unhealthy in the body, where it's like, am I excited to feel like, to know if I'm still like good enough for them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there should be a real sense of, I think in a very healthy relationship, that you don't have to perform. You can just be yourself and it is accepted.
Yeah.
And also that you look forward to just having time with that person. It's not always about just how you're feeling, how they make you feel, but also, how you're making them feel, that there's this reciprocal exchange of energy and chemistry. I can go to a 3-hour Costco with my husband if I needed to, and I could also be on a vacation at the beach. It doesn't really matter, but I love that guy and I love palling around with him. It doesn't really matter what we do.
Yeah. I like that. That makes me think of my mom. She's like, we laugh a lot. She's like, it's just fun, and we have, things, but we're friends, and like that's my guy.
Yes. And that's really what the Masters of Relationship from the Gottman method will talk about. It's about friendship. Have you fostered a really powerful friendship with each other?
Yeah. And before we kind of go more into the marriage side of things, I was curious to ask you, as we start into the transition of the discussion on marriage and divorce, I think when I talk to young people, there's a big fear around, because I definitely feel like Gen Z has a pretty high sense of self-awareness of like, I know if they came from a divorced family or, parents with a rough marriage, there's this pretty widespread fear of like, I'm going to repeat it. And I'm curious if you have any thoughts on how a young person can recognize if they're repeating the patterns of their parents' unhealthy marriage, because it feels known to them, like it's what they know, and like how are they also to know differently if that's what they know? That makes sense?
Yes. Well, that kind of brings us back to attachment research. So basically, we have 3 attachment styles. I don't know if you've ever spoken about this before on your podcast.
Not on the podcast, but a little bit, on TikTok.
So we have like a secure attachment base, then avoidant, and then ambivalent. And 50% of our national population is securely attached. That's where you've grown up in a home where your parents...
50%?
50%.
That's higher than I thought, actually.
Yeah, so parents have been able to relay emotional connection, that you are, a person worthy of connection, and also provided for physically for your needs. So people with secure connection have often better immune systems. They have the ability to understand how they're feeling and talk about it, that they can also hear how somebody else is feeling and stay curious and talk about it too. They have a range of emotion that they feel. And also that if they're out of scope, like if they don't really understand what's really going on, they're willing to ask for help. So there's a real sense of trust that's built in for somebody that's securely connected, okay? But they're willing to ask for help when they don't really know what to do. Then you have avoidant attachment, and that's 20% of our population. Avoidantly attached people have grown up with a home where there's at least one primary caregiver that kind of shuts down emotion. Physical needs are met, but the home feels more like an emotional desert, okay? And so what happens is avoiders end up growing up sometimes with a higher pain tolerance. They kind of look around and go, hey, there's no one here really taking care of my emotional needs, so I'm just going to rely on myself. And they become very independent, and often very independent early. And they often will also have closet lives, a shadow side that a lot of people don't know about because they are concerned about shame.
Just clocking me right now.
Livy's like,
we're working on it. I'm getting there, y'all.
Yeah. And then the bandwidth for emotion is very narrow. So, for instance, it's hard for avoiders to sometimes read emotion on other people because they didn't grow up in a home where emotions were really understood and talked about. And when emotions come up that are, say, like maybe negative emotions, or it's kind of out of what you're allowed to feel, it can often be met with anger first, because it's frustrating to be feeling something other than maybe happy or sad when you're allowed to be sad. So avoiders often, in therapy, sometimes have a harder time with therapy because to really understand their feelings and even understand where it's stuck in their body can feel so foreign because they've built up coping skills and mechanisms to not feel. All right? Yeah. So numbing out is often very much something that's very common for an avoider just because that's just been the norm. Now, ambivalently attached people is 15% of our population, and that's where they had a parent that was anxious in their attachment. Sometimes this parent was there and very present to the point of sometimes intrusive because they were anxious themselves about parenting or something that's, on their minds. They're very preoccupied, and then they get this preoccupation and they go away. So say another relationship kind of takes over, they're dating somebody else, and then they're not really giving their kid as much time and attention. And so the child grows up with kind of a push-me-pull-you experience in their parenting. Sometimes this parent's here with me, sometimes they're not, and I get anxious trying to figure out what I'm going to experience next. So when it comes to these attachment styles, if you've grown up with a primary parent that has one of these, and you're going to have one of them, you have an 85% chance of actually passing down that attachment style to your child, right? Yeah. So let's cut to, for instance, a divorce. A divorce can absolutely be a toxic rupture that a child has experienced. So I always say to parents, like, even with divorce, it's important for you to understand that if you've done your best to try to raise a securely attached child, this is still a rupture in the relationship, and you have to help make sense and process through it so their secure attachment can still stay intact. To be a secure person doesn't mean you're not going to go through tough things, but it does mean that you will probably have more resiliency and the ability to probably process through it with more ease than, say, somebody that's more avoidant or ambivalent. Because you're going to take the time to probably understand your feelings about it, to talk through it, to ask for help, to recognize, oh, I'm feeling really depressed or super anxious about this. I don't know what to do. I need help. Right? Yeah. The one great thing that I think with your particular generation, Livi, is that you guys are very mental health minded. Yeah. And everyone is super good about being preventative. And I love that about you know, kids in their teens now in their 20s. They think preventatively, and they also think that about their relationships. When I have some younger people in their 20s that they will come to see me for couples work because they're like, we just want to grow and we want to just kind of check in and be preventative of making sure that, you know, we're on the right track for our relationship. I just think that's fabulous.
Okay.
Because people like in their later, you know, 50s or 60s that often come to see me, they've let things go for so long that it is hard to get back on track.
Yeah.
Right? They feel like they've actually put everybody else first for so long that they never really took care of the real needs of the couple. And so now they're suffering and often ending up in divorce.
Yeah, and that's exactly, you know, today is the future. Like, work on it now, just because it's also just on a neurological level, it's hard to rewire those patterns that have been there for, you know, 2-3 decades.
It is, but if you are willing, you know, when we talk about brain plasticity, right? If you have a neural net with a certain behavior pattern in relationship that you're recognizing, this doesn't really serve me. For instance, some people emotionally cut off, avoiders. That's a typical thing. Like, things are getting too close, you don't really know how to really handle that, and so then maybe they just ghost, or they don't talk about it anymore, or they're not really sharing their feelings. If you're aware that that's the behavior and you start taking steps, then you're going to activate a new neural net in your brain with a new way of being. And the more time you focus on really changing that behavior, you continue to build that neural net, and the other neural net of that old behavior pattern starts to atrophy and start to get smaller and smaller in the brain. So keep doing the work, because you're going to build this bigger muscle in your brain, and it's going to pay off in the long run in your relationships.
Yeah, it'll get easier, and it does. Like,
Yes.
if I do want to say that, if you're someone that feels like, you know, you have a more avoidant or anxious attachment, I think sometimes it can feel a little bit hopeless, and like, you know, I think a lot of young people feel like it's just too much, but I think we do sometimes underestimate the power of the mind and what it's like the way it's capable of rewiring that neuroplasticity. Like, I actually do feel, and I've seen it in my own life, where there is a lot of hope there.
Yes.
Like the rewiring, even just like looking at my own family, the rewiring all of us has gone through is like, I know I would have never even thought it was possible. And it's like, there is definitely hope there. And the more I speak to people like you on the podcast and read books by people like yourself, it's there is hope. And I think, you know, for anyone listening, like, I really feel that you are more resilient and have the capacity for evolvement than you might give yourself credit for.
Yes, and I think going back to attachment styles, and we talked about, like, for instance, a toxic rupture. You can change your attachment style. Like, you don't have to stay avoidant.
You don't have to label that forever.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't have to stay ambivalent. But you can also be a secure person and go through some significant trauma and also change your attachment style too to something that may be more maladaptive. Because we have disorganized overlays. We go through tough things. But then, are you willing to have earned secure attachment? And earned secure means that you put the time in to really work through your issues so that you can be a more securely connected person in the world and have securely connected relationships.
Yeah.
I myself had more ambivalent tendencies when I was in my 20s, for sure. You know, I was often very anxious in relationship, but through doing my own personal work, I feel very much as a secure person in the world now, and I do my best to raise securely connected kids too.
Yeah. There you go.
There you go.
First, before I continue, I have something in my eye, and I'm just gonna.
You gotta move it.
I'm just gonna do this real quick. All right, give it a sec. All right, cool. How you feeling?
I feel good. Yeah.
All right, I love this. Let's see, where do I want to go? Yeah, you kind of already answered the other questions I had. Yeah, let's move into the marriage realm.
Sure.
So, okay, I'm really curious what your thought is on this. So, marriage is on the chopping block. Like, I think a lot of people are questioning, is the institution of marriage, I suppose, like, does it still stand? Is it reasonable to think I could be with somebody for 20, 30, 40 years? What are your thoughts on that? Like, do you believe in lifelong marriages, or what are your thoughts on marriage in general?
I do believe in lifelong marriage, but I also believe that a lot of times in one's growth in marriage, you may come to certain chapters where you recognize that the partnership is not healthy for either person anymore, and that something has come to a close. So that does happen. But I've also met people with lifelong marriages that have stayed together and they've had a beautiful life together. Yeah. And it really comes back to, are you the kind of person that you're willing to stay committed to a partnership and grow together? Do you have two people that are willing to grow with each other? You know, if there's only one person that's committed to that and then the other person isn't, then that's how people become disengaged and they go other directions. There was a great psychiatrist years ago that wrote a couple books called M. Scott Peck. And he would talk about in couples work how you start at the base camp of a mountain. And one person starts to climb the mountain of the partnership because they're pursuing a goal for themselves, while the other person holds camp for that person. And then there's this reciprocal exchange. Once you've reached that camp, that next goal, then the other person holds camp while the other partner then reaches their goal. And it goes back and forth in that way. This reciprocity of building something together and staying committed to that and helping to support each other's dreams and also having dreams together. I mean, are couples dreaming together? What are you dreaming for? I think, especially when it comes to raising children, you do want to show that there's been a high level of commitment to family. And so I believe in marriage. I think it's a spiritual commitment. I think it's also just a basic partnership in the world too. You know, you can achieve more when you are committed with each other financially and what you can create in the world together. And children really feel more grounded in the world when they have that base.
Yeah.
If you have a lot of different partners as a single parent, I think it creates an unsteadiness for children. And children need certainty and they need security in the world. And so I just want to encourage everyone, like, if you're out there and you're dating, take that time to date for yourself and don't always invite that into your family time with your children, because you're fostering some kind of attachment with that person being in your child's life. And so you don't really want to invite that person or give them entrance into your time with your children until it's somebody that you really know that, like, this is someone I think I could have a committed relationship with and I want them to be around my child.
I like that. Yeah, it's something. I had a therapist on here years ago, and something you said just now that's stuck with me since I had him on was the idea of working together. And he talked about his first marriage, and he was like, we met in our 20s, and I was like, me and this girl are so similar. You know, we both meditate every day. We both really love tennis. We both, have pretty similar spiritual beliefs. But they didn't know how to work together, and they didn't know how to pursue goals together and evolve together. And he was like, in my marriage now, we are not as similar in our interests, but we're similar in what you've mentioned, in our values and in our ability to work at it. And I think it's interesting because I recently I saw a TikTok video and this girl was saying, she was like, to the married people out there, what do you mean that marriages work? Like, that doesn't make it sound enticing. And I thought about that, and at first I agreed with her. However, I also thought, when did we decide that work was a bad thing? Because nothing good comes for free. Like,
that's right,
you
Livi.
know?
You know, I think what you're bringing up is that a lot of times people try to just mistake love as a feeling. And you'll hear that, well, I just fell out of love, or, you know, or that you really have to have this strong feeling, or I don't feel a certain way anymore. But if you really look at the definition of love, love is an action. It's a verb. I love this person. You feel love, but you also love this person. And as a result of loving someone, you actively pursue action steps on a regular basis to show your love. So for instance, you know, for my husband, I actively pursue loving him. And I do that through having engaged conversation, listening about his day, giving feedback, hearing, you know, intimate things that we can talk about, that because we have a sacred circle in our relationship, that I'm that person. I'm his person to talk to about those things. And I catch it, and I catch it with a level of privilege and honor, you know, and he's my person for that. That's pretty special.
Yeah.
You know, you don't want to just kind of throw that out anywhere to just everybody, because not everybody can catch the real sacredness of the things that you need to share that are intimate about yourself. Right?
I love that. I love that you defined that too, because I think that's a really good distinction.
Well, and love is an action. When you look at, say, you know, chronic illness, or, you know, somebody that's in the hospital, or someone that's going through cancer, and you see partners that are really with that person through it all, you know, that is action.
Yeah.
That is love in action.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the topic, now switching gears a little bit, going into, we've kind of defined, you know, dating, a little bit more of what the topic of marriage and what real love looks like. Moving into more of the divorce side of things, just on a core level, and I'm sure you get asked this a lot, of what are the most common causes of divorce in your experience? I mean, we've touched on that a little bit, but it sounds like, I don't know if you have anything more to expound on in that realm.
Well, I mean, divorce happens for a lot of different reasons,
Yeah.
but probably like the top three would be finances. Cheating is often, you know, or some kind of severe addiction could be another reason why people might divorce. Feeling incredibly betrayed on some kind of level, and that people can't really recoup and come back.
Yeah. On the topic of cheating, I remember reading a book, and it brought about like love and marriage, and it brought up the topic of cheating and almost like the science behind why people cheat. I would be interested to hear your thoughts on that. Like, why do people have
cheat?
the need to cheat, or feel the desire?
I think there's some really good books to further that. I'm definitely not an expert in that particular field, but if you look at, say, Esther Perel's book, The State of Affairs, I think she does a really great job of illustrating a myriad of reasons. There's also another great book by Shirley Glass, and I think it was, I'm forgetting the name of the title, but that's the author. And she will talk about, you know, why people also have different affairs. But typically, just kind of what comes to the top of my head is that, you know, people can be in marriages where it lacks sexual intimacy. There are certain people that are chronic philanderers that just want what they want. And other times it can be emotional infidelities that develop or just even remain as an emotional infidelity. There's so much emotional connection to this person. They don't know, they feel so understood. It's like they've given all of that emotional intimacy to somebody else and not their partner. So that's just kind of a few things that come to mind for why that might come to be.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I like that you gave some resources as well. I'll definitely... It was very interesting. I had never really thought about... I can't remember the name of the book.
More Than Friends.
More Than Friends.
Shirley Glass, More Than Friends.
Okay.
You know, because sometimes it can be just an innocent friendship, but if you're not getting emotionally fed in your relationship, and then here's this person that understands you and is available, then you just start to move towards where you're getting fed, where the attention's coming from.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Anyway, I myself find that interesting, but I'll change the route a little bit in the interest of listeners. But okay, I'm gonna switch gears actually a decent amount here.
Sure.
So a discussion I had with my roommate before I was coming here today, because I told her you were coming on, and we were discussing thoughts of questions I could ask, and something me and her were talking about was there seems to be a bit of debate isn't really the word, but conversation about, is it better to wait to get a divorce if you know a marriage is just not working until your kids get older? Because that seems to be sort of a conversation parents have. They're like, we'll wait till they're out of the house or something like that. What are your thoughts on that? Like putting it off?
Sure. Well, there is actual research that shows that if you have a home life where there is chronic conflict, and there are children involved and they're witnessing this and being around this, those children will end up having more longer-term issues with depression and anxiety if they stay in that household with chronic conflict, as opposed to parents that had conflict and recognize they're actually going to be better parents to parent separately and outside of this relationship. And so in the short term, a child may experience depression or anxiety because of the break, but then in the long run, they will do better because, you know, their parents handled the issue and the issue was them.
Interesting. Yeah, that would definitely make sense. It's also, where are we at with time? Are we
37 minutes in.
37 minutes. Okay, I just wanted to double check. Okay, that's interesting. And on the topic of waiting.
So on the topic of waiting, I think it just depends on what what is the agreement, between the two partners. If they feel like they can continue to live together and they're not really wanting to have relationships outside, or it just depends on what people's needs are.
Yeah.
For some people, they can't do that. They need to just kind of be done and continue to move on. And there is no typical age stage where it's going to be better for the kids.
Yeah.
It really just comes back to like what is manageable and doable for the parents.
Yeah.
For some parents, if they continue to stay, if they become more chronically depressed and disengaged in their home lives as a result of staying, then I would say do something about that, because that's not going to be helpful in raising your children.
Yep.
Now you're a parent that's not really present.
Yeah, yeah. And, your kids learn to, learn to accept what they receive based on what you accept and receive. Like, they mimic you. They see everything that you do.
Right.
Yeah.
I just met somebody recently that is in a relationship, a long-term relationship. They've been together like 15 years or so. They've got 3 kids. And the partner says pretty abusive things in front of the children. And so this person's kind of like, well, I'm not really sure what's the timing because of the ages of my kids. She actually said that. And I said, what do you think you're modeling here when this guy is allowed to speak this way to you in front of the kids? Because now the kids are even saying, that's not okay, Mom, that he said that. When are you going to leave? Like, they're actually asking her that.
Yeah.
So when your kids have a higher IQ, your emotional quotient about some of this stuff, and they're bringing it to your attention, I think that really says something, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we often have to be careful when it comes to a divorce situation with kids getting caught in being adultified or parentified.
Yeah.
So parentification looks like I'm a parent to my parent, and adultification is I'm my parent's buddy, I'm being told a lot of very intimate things that are really not appropriate for me as the child to know and understand. Because parents sometimes want that ally, and they'll look to their kids to become that for them in a divorce process, and that is not healthy. You really want your kids to be kids, and that you would have healthy boundaries and actually withhold any kind of information, because two most important people are their parents to them, and they deserve to be able to love you both equally.
Yeah.
Even if you're no longer able to be together. They should be allowed to have a healthy relationship with you both for the long run. And this comes back to that secure connection piece. If you're a securely connected person, you're going to want that for your kids, because you want them to be securely connected people, even after a divorce.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that was actually exactly what I was going to ask, because I had some questions around that, sort of getting caught in the crossfire.
Mm-hmm.
So on that topic, my question would be, like, to what degree should you talk to your kids about your struggles? Because I feel like there's sort of a balance of, like, you don't want to avoid, like, this is obviously happening, so you don't want to avoid it altogether. However, how much should you actually be telling them? I suppose that might range depending on age. I'm not really sure. Because I don't know, for me or for my friends that are my age, a lot of us have found it really helpful to hear some of the stuff about our parents' marriages. And it can be hard to hear, but I found it helpful because it explained some things and helped me reflect on the way I go into relationships. However, a lot of us received a little too much too soon.
Sure.
So I don't know, what are your thoughts on, like, the balance of how much should be shared, what maybe not so much? Does that depend on age? Yeah, I don't know.
I think it's really important as parents that whatever happened as intimate partners is actually kept within that boundary, that you actually don't share why the relationship has broken down,
Really?
Whatever details.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think you can give kind of universal things, especially when it comes to little children. Little children don't need to know any of that. And even teenagers, you're allowed to have your own personal life as a parent, and the reasonings that things came to be, and the details of that. Because what happens is when parents start to share those details, kids want to start to align, and they want to then become protectors or choose a side. And we really don't want to ever put our kids in positions where they need to choose a side between their parents. The only perspective is that they need to be loved, and they need to feel cherished by both of their parents, and they need time, right? Because at some point they're going to grow up, and they're going to the goal is that you're not going to continue to live with either of your parents, but that you can become a self-corrective adult and go live your adult life. So to understand maybe at a later point, not when it's in the heat of a moment of a divorce, and some people go through divorces that are like 2 years, 5 years. It can be really long-term divorces. None of that information is super helpful. Now, there are things where, for instance, when I've seen financial abuse taking place, like one parent has all the money and they're withholding money, but then the other parent is the one that's raising the kids, they're going to see it. Like, you can be honest about, like, well, what do you mean we have to move? And you just say, well, I actually don't, I'm not receiving money from mom or dad right now, and so we have to move. I can't afford this place. And because those are facts, right? Facts that are actually impacting their current life.
Right.
Right? And so when kids are experiencing that, they are allowed to have an opinion about it.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because it's that's true. I mean, the details don't necessarily really matter that much, I guess, because it's not like they were blind to the dysfunction. Like the kids kids are seeing, like, if one of the parents is, like, calling the other names or, you know, the way that there may have been like a lack of physical intimacy, like they're already saying that, like I can't imagine that they would, a marriage would be unhealthy or a divorce would occur and the kids would be like, I don't know, like completely.
Livy, there's a lot though that kids don't see. You know,
yeah, I guess that's true.
For my area in Orange County, I have so many parents that have been so kid-centric in their family lives that the kids have always come first, and then they weren't taking care of their marriages.
Yeah.
Right? And so they do a really good job learning how to parent, but you know, when you really take care and foster a committed relationship, your marriage has to come first and then your kids.
Yeah.
Right? And a lot of times people have it the other way around. And so we're having these emotionally disengaged relationships, but yet, you know, Johnny's getting to all his practices and he's getting his private lessons, or he's, you know, achieving, but then we're not really fostering, you know, the connections that are important, that make relationship feel really alive.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Because I guess one other question on that, because I guess with like the topic of details, I feel, I don't know, like I guess, because I wonder if a young person would feel, because it can feel a little bit shattering when you realize that your parents' marriage is not what you thought it was, and I guess I feel like would a young person feel like the question to their answer of why, like why was it not what I thought it was, like how can you answer it without like sharing if you shouldn't be sharing like the little details? How do you know, does that make sense? Like how do you help them make sense of it?
I guess where we kind of need to land with some of this is that some kids are going to see the information, and we're going to have to validate it and make sense of it. So for instance, I've had some kids come in and be like, I caught my dad having an affair, right? Yeah. And then that information gets out, right? And maybe mom already knew about it, but then was, you know, trying to keep everything, you know, as is, but then it just bleeds over and now one of the kids sees something. And so you do have to make sense of that. You do have to validate that that might have been really painful for the child to see it. Right. But I think for, you know, as much as possible, you want to try to shelter your kids from any kind of intimate details of why a marriage has broken down, because it's not really their business. That happened between husband and wife, not mom and dad. If mom and dad were continuing to do a really good job as parents, then we maintain that. But if there is some kind of drug addiction or alcohol addiction or some kind of gross financial, you know, loss or abuse or domestic violence, things that you have been blatant that you do see, then you have to help your kids make sense of that and process through it.
So it's not so much like the details aren't necessarily their business, but it's your business as parents to help them work through some of the internal rupture, this sort of family dynamic change.
Yes, of how they've been impacted by it.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
That is your job as a parent. And for a lot of parents, when they're first going through a divorce, they're in a lot of pain.
Yeah.
And so their pain can often bleed over to their kids. And that's why we're talking about parentification or adultification, right? Like I once talked at a divorce support group, and this woman said, I was crying at the table and I just needed a friend, and I told my 9-year-old everything, and then my 9-year-old just gave me a big hug and told me it's going to be okay, Mom. And I said to her, please don't do that again.
Yeah.
Please don't put your 9-year-old in that kind of situation where he has to be your listening ear about everything that's not going right in this divorce, because that's a heavy burden for a 9-year-old child to now have to carry.
Yeah.
And he needs a safe place to be able to divest that to somebody else and learn that it's not his responsibility to take care of you.
Yeah. Because, yeah, I mean, you have to, I feel like you would need to make that distinction where it's like, as much as maybe you feel like you're friends with a child, I think especially when they're like teenagers or like more like young adults, that's still your kid. Like you're still a parent,
Yes.
you know? And it's like, that's first and foremost. Like they need a parent.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
They need a parent. And divorce absolutely does impact teens and people in their 20s. You know, if your parents were the kind that were able to wait, or something happened and they decided it was college time, that you're off to college and now we're no longer going to be together. I mean, it's shocking, you know? And so are you taking the time to process that for yourself? Sometimes it's hard. Maybe they kind of think, well, you're distracted with college or with whatever endeavor that you're pursuing, so you're not going to have to put much time and energy into this now. But it still does impact you.
Yeah.
And it's important to talk about how it does impact you. And, you know, vacation time with parents, holidays may look different. Talk about it. Share your feelings. There are a lot of really progressive co-parents out there that actually can share holidays. I've seen it, you know, especially as people get older and then they have their own marriages and kids. You will often see divorced parents still at the same Thanksgiving, you know, because they're there to support their kids and now grandkids. Yeah. So I just want to encourage everybody, have an open dialogue about what you're needing. You know, make sure that you're getting good quality time with each other in your relationships, and be willing to talk about how you feel, and be the kind of, if you are a parent and you're listening to this too, be the kind of parent that you can stay curious and hear it from your child. You know, a lot of teens and kids in their 20s, they have a lot to share if you're willing to listen. And also sometimes it's just the importance of listening that helps it move through, and it doesn't mean you actually have to do something about it, but they just needed to be heard.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I love, this is really interesting. This was very enlightening for me, and I think probably for a lot of people listening. Probably ended on, I'll do one more question here.
Sure.
I want to go.
You know what I'd like to kind of come back to, what we were talking about earlier, when it comes to, say, if you are the product of a divorce yourself, and then you're anxious about, oh, what if I continue to model that now in my own relationships? Continue to go back to working on yourself and becoming that securely connected person. You're still going to have blind spots of maybe what you saw growing up based on either of your parents. But the more that you make the implicit explicit, meaning you have this awareness of what you did see and how it impacted you, that you take the time to reflect on that, that's how you can change it.
Yeah, definitely. I like that. I think I'll just ask, instead of pulling from here, is there anything else that you might want to share just in regard to specifically teens and 20-somethings on the topics that we've been talking about? Is there any other advice, tips that come to mind? I guess,
you know, my advice is just please value that relationship can be a really powerful way to personally grow, and value commitment. Like it's a beautiful thing to be in a committed relationship with somebody and work towards personal goals together and have goals that are shared. Don't take that lightly. Look for someone that wants that with you, and be the kind of person that can do that too. You know, a lot of times we give up on things if it feels like it's just too hard, too quick. But if you have really gone through like the red flags that we were talking about earlier, and you've kind of really vetted this person, and you've looked at your own issues for maybe why all of a sudden it feels too hard, and you are willing to do the work to move through that, you know, and that person is as well, then you really can come out feeling more enriched, you know, because you've committed to something that you both are growing a deeper intimacy with each other in your worlds. Yeah. I like that. What a good way to end it. And
At the end of my episodes, I do some rapid fire questions.
Yes.
I'm gonna move us into these, and then we'll wrap up.
Okay.
So, first rapid fire question is, what is something you've bought that costs less than $100? What's the best thing you've bought that costs less than $100?
I'm going to sound kind of old, but I love my Instapot.
Really?
If you don't
Nice.
have one, you need to go get one.
See, I'm
it's
like
a game
afraid
changer.
of an Instapot.
Oh my gosh, it is an Insta changer.
It's an Insta changer. All right, good to know. Where do you go for like? Is there like Instapot recipe?
Yes.
Where's the
you
where's
can go
the Instapot
online.
recipe mecca? Where do I go?
You would probably just go online, but they actually, when you buy an Instapot,
They'll
it will
give you
give you a
some.
bunch of recipes, also in your little packet. But then get creative. If you want to put together some kind of cool dish, just throw it all in there and see what happens.
I like it. I like it. Maybe I should get into Instapotting because I'm also like a big like prep everything at the beginning of the week, so I don't have to cook throughout the week.
Exactly.
It's probably the perfect place to do something like that.
Chili, short ribs.
Yeah.
I'm telling you.
The Instapot, y'all. Second question is, what piece of advice do you give others that you often have a tough time taking yourself?
To be compassionate with yourself.
Yeah.
Self-compassion.
Yeah.
It's easy to say it, and it's also so hard to actually live it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. I feel you on that one. Third question is, do you have a fashion or clothing essential?
Bright shoes.
Bright shoes. Like colorful?
It's a little color therapy for myself, because when I sit in my office and I hear things of a traumatic nature on a daily basis, I love to look down at my feet and see a pop of color.
I like that. That's fun.
So I often have shoes that maybe even have flowers that are, etched into them, or some kind of bright color, just so that it just brings a little smile to my face.
Huh, I love that. That's fantastic. Fourth question is there a book you love, whether it's one that has impacted you in the long term or one that you've read recently that you really enjoyed?
I really love Brene Brown's Daring Greatly.
Great book.
I think she did such a great job with
Yeah.
that book, and I refer to it often, and it's just really consumer friendly as well.
Yeah.
Just so many good nuggets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's great.
She
She's
is.
great. And there's just like so much like garbage in the self-help industry, and I feel like she just does a good job.
Well, and she's so well researched.
Yeah, exactly. And then last question is there a song that you've had on repeat lately?
Okay, Iron and Wine, Call It Dreaming. If you haven't heard that song,
What's the genre?
it's kind of folk.
Okay.
Yeah,
Love folk.
it's just, I don't know, the lyrics are so powerful, and it's a beautiful, beautiful song.
Nice. I like it. I need to put together a playlist of everyone's answers to that and put it out there.
Oh,
to
that'd be so
to
good.
listeners, that'd be fun. All right. Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're
This was
so welcome.
fantastic. I appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate you, and thank you for having me.
Beautiful. Clink.